Subscribe now. EU Debates.
Distinguished guests, dear Professor De Hus, caro Sindaco, dear Europeans, thank you to EUI for having me here at this beautiful place. The EUI represents a real public good by contributing to and sharing our European heritage and values between academics and being the link between academia and policymakers. La prima cosa che vorrei fare.
The first thing that I would like to do is gather the legacy left by David Sassoli. He used to say that he was in love with Florence. But David was a fighter for the European Parliament, for us, for Europe. He believed in the power of Europe to forge a new path in this world.
Question that we have before us today. But before we examine what Europe should be, I believe we need to better understand what Europe is, and more importantly, what people want Europe to be. In my first address as President of the European Parliament, I described myself as part of the generation that sees no old and no new Europe. We are the first of the Erasmus generation, the last of the Wałęsa, Kohl and Havel generation. What I meant was that I am part of the Europe generation. 18 years ago, on the 1st of May, I was standing in Valletta with what felt like the entire country at midnight, staring across the sea in our grand harbour as we counted the minutes and the seconds until Malta, together with 9 other countries, joined the European Union as member states. I still recall the feeling of unbridled possibility, hope and belief in the future. A sort of sense of homecoming, of victory in the potential of our people, of relief, of joy, feelings shared by millions across Europe. With war in Europe today, it is that spirit, that sense of purpose, of enthusiasm, of a clear direction that I want our European project to recapture. People in Ukraine, in Moldova and Georgia, and still in the Western Balkans, are now looking to Europe with the same sense of belonging and hope. And I want people to believe as we did. And to do that, we need to understand that we are not just an economic bloc. We're not just about free movement or about abolishing roaming charges. For my generation, Europe is, as cliché as this might sound, about a shared dream, about shared values, about a shared future, about coming together. To us, Europe is the future. It has always been the future. However, we cannot deny that over the last years, polarization in our societies has increased. There are still too many people who feel lost, let down, and left out. At the same time, many will now look to Europe and to our institutions for leadership. And we need to be able to respond. We need to be able to lead. We must counter the anti-EU narrative that takes hold so easily and so quickly, mis- and disinformation enhanced by bots and fabricated in Russian troll factories. Europe is about the defense of multilateralism, the understanding that we can only face the future together. Ladies and gentlemen, leadership requires a capacity to also be self-critical. And we must acknowledge that there exists a gap between what we believed, what people expect, and what people is able to deliver at the moment. The events of the last months with Russia's brutal, illegal, medieval invasion of Ukraine has accelerated the need for Europe to create the tools and the processes that it needs to lead in this new and uncertain world. There is a pre-February 24th reality and a post-February 24th reality. And the world has changed. We must understand that the weight of the global democratic order now rests more heavily than ever before on Europe's shoulders, and we must be able to carry it. It is our whatever it takes moment, a moment that comes once in a generation, a moment where we must understand that Europe is also on the streets of Bucha, in the tunnels of Mariupol, in the cellars of Irpin, on the shores of Snake Island. People being brutalized are looking to us for support, for hope, even for survival. They understand that there is no alternative to Europe. And anyone who has lived under the autocracy that marked so many nations in Europe in the last century understands only too well that there is no other way. Now, Europe may not be perfect, we are far from perfect, but we represent a bastion of liberal democracy, of personal freedoms, of liberty of thought, of safety and security, where you can be whoever you want to be, a way of life and living that we perhaps have taken for far too long for granted. In Europe, we celebrate differences. It is what enables us to develop and what will enable us to become stronger, what makes us unique, what makes us European. Putin's grave mistake was assuming our differences were a weakness, our defense of fundamental rights a sign of feebleness. He was wrong. In democracies like ours, these are our strengths. These are our foundations for the next steps. They are our legitimacy, and they are our compass. And this is why we have accelerated our moves towards building a new security and defense union. Why we must and we will disentangle our dependencies from the Kremlin. Why we will end imports of oil, and why we must follow through with our policy of zero gas from Russia. Why we will continue with sanctions and aid to Ukraine. Why we will and must rebuild Ukraine. Why we will care and welcome all those who flee Putin's bombs, missiles, and atrocities. And this is why Ukraine will win. And this is why Europe will be ready for the next generation. Turning to our populations, it has become increasingly clear that European leaders cannot fail to address rising prices and the increasing cost of living that are hitting hard. And for European businesses, in a globalized economy shaken up by the consequences of war, the European Union must continue to encourage and support them as they diversify away from Russia. But again, we must be honest. We can mitigate the consequences as far as possible, but our way, our European way, is worth a cost. It is worth defending. and it is worth the price we must pay. Europe has shown the world unprecedented determination, solidarity, and unity against the war. Of this, I am proud. It must remain the blueprint for us going forward, and we will continue to stand forcefully against autocracy and continue to stand strongly for Ukraine and for our common values of democracy, dignity, justice, equality, and the rule of law. We must become closer, but at the same time, we must become more open. After World War II, cynics mocked Robert Schuman's 1950 Europe Day Declaration, where he deemed it to be a utopian aspiration for peace and prosperity. Yet believed then in what seemed impossible for Europe is the reason why we are here together today in this Palazzo Vecchio, an emblem of European civilization, discussing our achievements and the next steps for our common European future. Our legacy, what we leave for those who come after us, will not only be ornate palaces, but firm foundations for a new European way. I trust that the next generation, I am certain, will play their part for climate action, reap the benefits of a digital economy, consume differently than today. However, we cannot expect them to fix unresolved crises which are ours to address. They need us to take our responsibilities seriously today. Europe needs leadership today, not tomorrow. Leadership that saw us welcome more than 5 million people fleeing Ukraine. Leadership that is also on display here at EUI, with people who have worked hard to integrate and facilitate Ukrainian professors, academics, and students in this institution. Next Monday, on Europe Day, we will receive the conclusions from the conference on the future of Europe, the results of a pan-European citizen consultation. The onus, the responsibility will be on us, European leaders, to listen and to take recommendations on board in terms of acting on people's demands, on policy changes, on defence, health, climate, security, and more. This is a real opportunity for Europe, because if it's not now, then when? Coming out of a devastating pandemic, and since Russia's illegal and brutal assault on Ukraine, we are now at a historic crossroads. European leaders together must stand for the politics of hope. We must confront easy cynicism and stand firm against aggression. And as long as we keep our priorities right, I am convinced that we are fit for the next generation. Let me end on this note of optimism. The truth is that the European Union has never been stronger. The European Union has never had such a determined sense of direction as it does today. We have never had such a sense of purpose to collectively address war on our continent, a climate emergency, our digital transition, and energy concerns. We have never felt such an urge to stand together against threats to peace and prosperity. We have never been more determined to stand up for European fundamental rights of democracy, liberty, solidarity, and equality. We know the threats that we face, and we know that we must confront them. So let us have confidence in ourselves. Let us believe. Thank you.
And thank you very much. Thank you so much. That was, of course, the President of the European Parliament, Roberta Metsola.